Good morning and thanks for joining us for KBOI 2 News Midday. I'm Rick Douglas. Now to your top 11 stories at 11. It is day 2 of historic hearings about an anti-discrimination bill drawing strong reaction from both sides of the issue. House Bill 2 would add the words gender identity and sexual orientation to the state's Human Rights Act. According to the Idaho Statesman, the numbers on the first day of testimony are impressive. 640 signed up to be heard yesterday, 30 actually speaking in the morning, 17 opposed, 13 in favor. And though the morning and evening sessions are being conducted in the Lincoln Auditorium, there are 3 rooms available for the overflow. University of Idaho's president is calling for a freeze on undergraduate tuition as long as the state legislature is willing to fund a pay increase for faculty and staff. President Chuck Staben says a tuition freeze would help increase access to education. Budget officials say the freeze and pay raise would cost the state about $1.6 million. Last night, St. Luke's unveiled the final plan for expansion at its downtown medical center. New buildings and services are planned to serve the needs of the growing population in the Treasure Valley. The hospital saying urban growth and transportation needs were a consideration, but Boise residents had mixed reaction to the planned closure of Jefferson Street.
If we're saying that the permanent closure, permanent loss of the connectivity of Jefferson is insignificant, we're not looking forward.
You know, to have to ride an extra block one way or the other, it's just not an issue for me. And I really like the path that they have for the children. I think that's a real safe option. I like that idea.
Hospital officials say they've taken feedback into account for the new bike lanes and sidewalks that will help commuters get around the reconfigured St. Luke's campus. The anxiety is easing back east as forecasters throttle back predictions about a monster blizzard. While conditions are still hazardous, the snowfall isn't creating the widespread havoc that had been predicted. The governors of New York and New Jersey this morning lifted travel bans. However, the storm continues to pummel eastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and eastern Connecticut. In Meridian this morning, a garage fire on Jack Snipe Drive. As you can see by the photo, garage doors blackened, 2 suffering minor injuries. Meridian Fire says a person living in the home was working on a motorcycle near an open gas can when the fire started. He was able to put the fire out with a garden hose before fire crews arrived. The Idaho Department of Health and Welfare is warning of a dramatic increase in flu deaths in the Gem State. They say Idaho is on track to be ahead of the state's average of 20 deaths a year from flu, and we're only in the midst of the season. The mortality is chiefly among the elderly, but officials say it is not too late to be vaccinated. Caldwell police are trying to track down a man who robbed a pharmacy. This happening in the 300 block of East Elm Street around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. They say he got away with cash and medicine. Investigators say he handed an employee a note and had a knife tucked into his waistband. Today marks the 2nd anniversary of the conviction of a Boise pastor now being held in an Iranian prison. In 2013, Saeed Abedini was convicted of undermining the Iranian government and attempting to sway youths away from Islam by creating a network of Christian home churches. Abedini was sentenced to 8 years in prison at a facility populated by violent criminals. The pastor's wife, Naghmeh Abedini, met with President Obama last week in Boise to ask him to help bring her husband home. Turning to consumer news, drivers across the country have been told to have their recalled Takata airbags replaced, but the fix could take months. In some cases, when the airbag deployed, the inflator cracked, sending shrapnel flying through the vehicle. But Consumer Reports says there simply aren't enough parts available right now to handle all the recalls.
The original supplier doesn't have the capacity to do it on their own, so another company has been brought in.
Even with production ramping up, it's estimated it could take up to 2 years to make enough parts to fix all the 8 million affected vehicles. President Obama wants to stop oil and gas exploration in a huge section of Alaska. He'll ask Congress to designate 12 million acres of Alaska's wildlife refuge, known as ANWR, as a protected wilderness area. Alaska's Republican lawmakers are not happy, saying it could cripple their state's economy. Missed it by that much. The Earth had a close encounter yesterday with a giant asteroid. It raced past us at about 35,000 miles an hour. The distance was the equivalent of a trip to the moon and back, plus a second trip to the moon. Astronomers say that might not sound like a near miss, but to them it was. And they also discovered that the massive rock had its own moon.